Yeah, I mean, I think the point is that nothing is ever absolutely black and white. And when you ask these two sorts of opinions, I think what we have to do is rely on folks with professional qualifications that have good knowledge of the local market, good knowledge of the international market, and certainly at HSBC, we try to look at a more global picture. We look at the local and the global. We look at different options, whether that's onshore or offshore planning, and we'll make a judgment based on our experience and our expertise. But absolutely, if you want an absolute black and white answer, it's very difficult.
Tarek, you have a question?
Just a follow-on comment from there, because you mentioned the people and the lens that we look at, that at the end of, at the age of 60, you would end up leaving the country. I think we look at that from a point of view, from the lens of being an employee. But Ras Al Khaimah, Fujairah Free Zone, all of these free zones, you can set up a company for a few $1,000s maximum, and that enables you to stay on here for as long as you like. So I think there is a loophole that can be addressed very, very easily by just paying a few $1,000s. And because I had one of my employees, she was 67 years old, she was head of my charity, and I couldn't keep her as an employee. She actually went and took a Fujairah Free Zone license, and she's got another 3 years of residence. So I think there are loopholes. I think that was one question. And the second point is, it's more of it's a scary sort of scenario. It was a little bit of a research that I read, that every year after the age of 55 of full-time employment, your life expectancy goes down by 2 years. So, so in other words, if you work till 65, 66, 67, you're likely to die at 70. But if you retire at 54, you're likely to live up to about 85. So I think that's a scary thought. It was just something to throw into the pot.
The moral of the story is you should hang up your boots.
You should save more, because if you want to retire at 54, you need a lot of savings.
I wanted to come back to Michelle on the idea of gratuity versus a standard pension plan, and the idea that gratuity is obviously the standard here, which most companies are obviously obliged to do, but in a sense it is kind of a dead money. It's not an investment vehicle. What would be your thoughts on the idea of converting that in some way where it becomes carved out of the central finance of a company and it gets woven into a standard investment vehicle?
Sure. I mean, I think the key, about gratuity is it's not a pension plan. And if you look at the, actual retirement needs of employees or individuals, that is not going to meet those needs. So that either has to be complemented with, a proper pension plan, either sponsored by the company or co-sponsored by the company, or just, plain private plan, or, that's got to be, merged into some form of a pension scheme, so that, to lessen the, the employer's, the financial burden on the employer. We recently posted on our website just a very simple tool. We called it a retirement calculator, and basically it it allows anybody that wants to use it to by inputting just very basic data and identifying at what age they'd like to retire, what is the current level of income, savings, etc. It helps them identify how much they need to actually set aside on an annual basis to meet their retirement goal. And that's generated just a lot of very interesting debate, because in many instances, I would say in most instances, people are very shocked at the outcome. And in some cases, the reaction is, well, if I need to set aside this much and it's a big amount and I can't afford that, so why do anything? And obviously that's not the right answer. The important thing is to start, and then to build on that as you go.
How much of an obstacle is to the idea of setting up retirement funds, or for people to consider, is the existence of gratuity? Oh, I have gratuity, I don't need to do that.
That's where education and awareness comes in, I think. I mean, because there is a misconception that that's going to be enough. But when you actually look at what your needs are going to be at retirement, when you wish to retire, some people don't want to retire at 60 or 65, they want to retire earlier, then clearly, that becomes an issue, and the gap, that's identified, becomes quite significant.
Here, the company's obligation is only to, if you're provided a pension, you don't have to provide a gratuity. If you provide gratuity, you don't have to do the other. Is that something, Jeff, that should be considered as part of the theme we had this morning in the reform restructuring for this market?
Well, I think it comes back to good governance and good stewardship from the employer at the end of the day. I mean, you can either do the minimum, or Michelle made the point earlier, if you have you're trying to reward your employees, retain them over the longer term. This is about how do you structure a program that makes it attractive for that employee to stay with you long term and have a meaningful level of income in retirement. So you can try and regulate for these things, and I think you can have guidance. It becomes more difficult and more challenging for newer companies and smaller companies to adhere to some of the to the cost of these types of programs. But ultimately, I think guidance is good, but it's more about stewardship and quality employers.
Michelle, do you have what's on gratuity? Is it sufficient? Does it need reform, do you think, in terms of it's such a pillar to employment in this market? And it's only relevant, you think, again, probably to expatriates in some sense. Although,
if I was being honest, I would be looking at this gratuity
structure
and saying, what a load of you-know-what. Seriously.
Why?
To say, here's what, 21 days per God knows how many years, and then here's 30 days for the rest, out of the time you put in effort into the business that you the employees benefit from. Is that a fair statement? No,
and it's capped at 2 years' pay, I think.
It's even worse than the free zones. It's like, I think, 14 days. So, I don't want to sound harsh, but last I checked, it sounds like slavery. But what the hell? We're supposed to be talking about moving forward, structuring it properly. This is unacceptable. And by the way, it's not just here. I mean, you can find this in different countries, in different parts of the world. It's the idea is that if I'm going to be fair, how do I be fair? Now, that's one side of the equation. The other side is that of the employee. Yes, it's my job as employer to take care of the employee, but it's not the job of the employee just to, what you call it, expect me to be his or her daddy. It's not my job. I'm supposed to give them something to make sure that they are secure as long as they are properly working and doing what's required of them, and to give them an opportunity to extend their stay within this organization for as long as they can function. But also to ensure that they're protected and taken care of to a certain degree. But if they are not, the mention of the idea of putting up a savings plan. Well, my issue with that one is I have two choices. It's an obligation to the company, to the employee. So if I take that money out and remove it from what is currently, move it and put it in an investment scheme, whatever the investment scheme, no matter how secure we think of an investment scheme, and that thing collapses, I'm still liable for it as an employer. So
the flip side of that is that maybe you end up only having to, it could do the opposite, and you could get you could only have to put in 60% and get your 100%.
What I'm trying to get, the point I'm trying to get to is that we have to be equitable for both sides, both for the employer and an employee. I don't like the scheme as currently the way it's structured, because it's, well, as I said, I think it's close to slave labor, but that's my point of view.
David.
Jeff, I think over the last few years we've seen a trend towards more people having to provide for their own pensions as state pension schemes have run down and company pension schemes have changed. But how are people going to survive in a zero interest rate environment? I mean, what's your advice and thoughts around that? Because people won't be able to rely on their savings in that type of environment.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, what we've seen is a trend of companies not guaranteeing a benefit, but just giving a contribution to the savings plan as you described, and they're not offering any guarantee around that. So if it does collapse, it does collapse. you know, as employees, and I'm in a program like this, you know, I pay my contribution, the company pays theirs,